The first recognizes the service of select employees who have reached significant milestones during their careers here at NCTD. The board recognizes employees in this manner on an annual basis. During the 6 years I've served as a member of this board, this presentation has always been one of my favorites. It's my honor to ask Laura Cote, Chief Administrative Officer, to introduce this item. Laura?
Thank you very much, Chair. And it is an honor as well to be presenting this item. We are here today for what I think is one of the most important events that we do each year, to recognize the employees that have truly dedicated themselves to serving our community. 2 employees are being honored today for their devotion of 30 years to their work in support of the district. We could advance the slide, please. So the district, just by way of background, was formed back in September of 1975. It was initially called, for those of you that are into trivia, the North San Diego County Transit Development Board. A little bit of a mouthful there. Then in August 30th of 2005, during the tenure of these employees, I might add, that are being recognized today, AB 1234 was signed into law that changed the name officially to North County Transit District. So our mission is to deliver safe, convenient, reliable, and user-friendly public transportation. So if you could go back to the slide that has all of the modes on it. Oh, okay, it was taken out. So I wanted to just mention that our workforce is 819 people strong, but it does comprise both employees that are contracted with us as well as those that are hired directly with the district. And we would like to, again, as I mentioned, honor them today. If we could advance the slide, please. The first honoree is Ernest Wing. He is a Breeze coach operator and was hired November 5th, 1992. And his achievement is 30 years, as I mentioned before. Next slide, we have Calvin Hutchins, also Breeze coach operator, hired April 24th, 1992. And again, 30 years of service to the district. So on behalf of all of these employees, we are so pleased for them to be recognized by our board of directors. I wanted to just mention quickly that this offers a great opportunity for all of you as board members to really interact with our frontline employees. And they're incredibly highly dedicated as well as qualified in their field. And so we're honored to have them here today. So I would like to have you meet them in a couple different ways. We actually have a video that we would like to share with you where we did ask them to say a few words. And then also we will be inviting their general manager for MV Transportation up to say a few words after that. So let's go ahead and play the video.
You know, when you have the same people that ride all the time, it's kind of like family, actually, and stuff, because you know each other. If you're not there for a couple of days, where you been? You know, this straight, yeah, they say that, where you been? You know, something like that means that you are their driver. It's amazing. It is amazing. If you want to see the world plain and simple, get on the bus.
I'm proud I can get them where they need to go, and I try to get them there safely. That's where I can. And if they don't know where they're going, I try to help them out to make sure they get out the right spot and everything. You gotta be nice to everybody that come on, try to treat everybody with respect. You know, as long as you treat them with respect, you get respect back.
It does take understanding when you're doing this job, because a lot of times, you know, you can actually make their day. You actually can. You know, after a while, you come to the conclusion that, man, I like this job. You can complain all you want, but if you're showing up and, you know, you dealing with people, liking people, hey, it is what it is. You like it.
I had this one route, this older lady, she used to get on my bus all the time. I used to always talk to her all the time. She talked to me. One time they were doing construction on the road, so there was no sidewalk. So I had to get off the bus and I helped her on the bus and stuff the best I could. And sometimes she bring me food and stuff like that. Cause trust me to do that. She gave me a Christmas card one time. I'm like, oh, I wasn't expecting none of that. I'm just doing my job.
I help seniors and stuff because they're gonna just cross. I'm like, whoa, don't do that. So I didn't use the school bus method. When I used to do, cross kids over and stuff. It made people happy and stuff. It's cool. It really is. Makes me smile and stuff.
My friend, I've been friends with him since 7th grade. So we're at the bowling alley. He told me, "Oh, it's 30 years. Announce it for everybody." So he had everybody, announce it for me and all that. It was nice.
All right, so. So at this time, I'd like to call forward Mr. Brown, who is their general manager, to say a few words. I know he's making his way up. There he is at the podium. And then once he has a few words, if any of you would like to say something as well, you're certainly welcome to. And then we're going to present them with the plaques and take a few photos, and then we'll be able to move in from there.
Thank you, Laura. Good afternoon, everyone. At this time, I'd like to call Ernest and Calvin up to the podium with me. So I'm just going to give a quick little bio of Ernest and of Kelvin, and then say a few words, and then we'll take it from there. So as you well know, both Kelvin and Ernest started in 1992. So I want everyone to just take a moment and think about what you were doing in 1992, right? So both Ernest and Kelvin, they were servicing the citizens of North San Diego County. That's when they started their journey. So outside of work, Kelvin he enjoys reading the Bible. His favorite verse being Psalms chapter 63. Psalms. Okay, Kelvin, he likes cars, but only the ones he can't afford. Ernest, Mr. Wing, again, in 1992, we're here for 30 years. When he's not driving his favorite route, which is the 313, he could be found in the driver's room playing a friendly round of dominoes. He likes to play dominoes. However, if you're looking for Ernest on Friday, you have to look at the Surf Bowl here in Oceanside, where he regularly bowls in leagues with friends and other operators. So a 10-year employee is someone that's a valued long-term employee. A 20-year employee should be commended for that achievement. But a 30-year employee, well, that's just plain awesome. And that speaks to your commitment to providing safe, efficient, reliable transportation to citizens of North County. And so today, we want to recognize your longevity and also honor you for your service. So on behalf of North County Transit District, MV Transportation, and the many, many passengers that you have transported in your 30 years of service, we all thank you.
I understand there may be some photos. Is that correct?
Yes,
Are we going to do that first, or can I?
you can. I
Offer a
would
few
love it if
words.
you invited the board to say a few things, and then we'll take the photos and then be gone.
That would be lovely. Ernest, Kelvin, thank you so much for your service. It's amazing. 30 years is amazing. Thank you.
I thought Mr. Brown was going to say 30 years. That's crazy.
Board Member Hensy.
I would like to iterate my gratitude for you. It seems like a simple thing, but you're providing such an essential service to people, and also in doing that dignity for this fundamental human right, which is the ability to get around and have a job and recreate and see the world. And aside from your really stylish glasses, Kelvin, I admire those. I also will remember for a long time your quote, which is, if you want to see the world, plain and simple, ride the bus. And there's so much truth to that. So thank you very much for your commitment and all of your years of service.
Thank you.
Board Member Jenkins.
Yes. Oops, can you hear me? I just want to say thank you also. As I was watching the video, one of you commented about your writers make you smile. And I think you make us smile because all of the employees do, because you're so dedicated to what you do. And so we're very grateful to you. Thank you.
Board Member Contreras.
Ernest and Kelvin, thank you so much. And it's you know, I get to ride public transit a lot, and it's incredible. Our bus operators are critical to our mission here at North County Transit District, and the dedication that you put into moving people safely, having good conversations. I really, really appreciate it. And I haven't had the opportunity to ride the 313, but I am on the 303 all the time. So I'm going to say, Kelvin is my bus driver. I've had the opportunity to have communication with him, have really good conversations. You know, I'm always trying to figure out better ways to make our buses move faster throughout our system, because there's so much congestion, right? And I'm always like, let's do a transit only lane. But I have personally witnessed Kelvin and his incredible spirit and dedication to his work. And I just want to say thank you. And we're going to go out for a beer, I'm telling you. And I have seen him on his break. He has his Bible out and he's reading the Bible. So I just thank you so much to the both of you, and shout out to Kelvin, who is the best bus operator I've ever had. And he told me in his 30 years, he's never had another council member on his bus. So let's change that up. Let's get into let's do it. Let's see the world through transit. Thank you.
Board Member Bhatt Patel. Hey, I've been on the 101. I just want to say.
Thank you. I guess we're going to have to take Board Member Contreras up on her challenge. So thank you so much for your service. Public service is such a difficult job. And, you know, for you all to stick it out for 30 years is definitely something that's amazingly admirable. When they asked, what were you doing 30 years ago? A few of us looked at each other because we were 4. And so for us, it's really exciting to see people that have stuck it out for that long, right? Like, I have a kid now, he's 2. I really hope that he will have the ability to take public transit around, and it's easier to take public transit around for folks because it is such an essential part of our community. And thank you for making people's days, you know, like just being there and being able to bring them from point A to point B. I think it's so essential. And Board Member Hinsey said it great. You know, I think it's a service that you're providing to our community that's absolutely irreplaceable. So thank you so much.
So I would invite everyone to please join me in showing our gratitude to these 2 wonderful employees and to our entire workforce for all their efforts.
Okay, we're going to take a few photos.
Okay. And again, thank you for all of your efforts and in advancing the mission and goals of NCTD.
Aren't you supposed to be? Oh, yes.
All of you guys, let's go. Hey, let's get everybody in the well and take a quick picture.
Okay.
Get the board members in there. Yeah. You guys dressed up for a reason. You keep scratching my skin.
I make everyone.
Right now, I'm 306.
306. Okay. And which one are you?
Right now, 303.
Okay, so now I know where the. I'm like. Alright, so let's show you back. You need us to speak? Okay. Who's tall? Dan, you're tall. It's tall, she's tall. I love it. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, 1, 2, 3. One more. 1, 2, 3. I'm gonna see. Let's see. How'd you do?
Okay, Suhal, are there any public comments on this item?
Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Any more board questions or comments on this? Nope. Okay, great. Our second presentation item is an update on personnel shortages and recruitment activities for our bus operations.
Good afternoon, board members.
As I'm sure you're aware, this continues to be a challenge, not only for NCTD, but for public agencies and private companies across the nation. Damon Blythe, the district's Chief Operations Officer bus, will provide an update on NCTD's progress in filling key operator and mechanic positions. Damon, you have the floor.
Thank you. Can we go to the next slide, please? So today I'm here to talk about the recruitment efforts. The last update I gave for this was in September. I'm pleased to report that we have made some pretty good progress since then. Just first of all, I want to kind of give you an overview of where we're actually at in terms of service performance. The chart that you're looking at is the number of trips that are lost by month due to whatever reason they're lost by. The color that you want to pay attention to the most, the one that we're talking about today, is that dark blue at the bottom. So as you can see there, we had our peak quite a few months ago, and we've been trending downward ever since. You may recall that we put in some increased operator wages and increased the benefits contribution for operators in August and September. And as you can see, we've been steadily driving down that number of trips canceled due to operator shortages every month. The month of November in particular is the lowest month that we've had since the operator shortages began in April of 21. So we've made some pretty significant progress. Next slide. So this is kind of an update of where we're at in terms of actual headcount. So we divide these up into the three modes: breeze, lift, and flex. The top line on each represents the projected number of people we should have in that position. The second line represents the number of people that are actually hired, and then the third line is the difference. So as you can see, flex has always been fully staffed. We haven't really had an issue with that. The lift and flex operators operate out of the same pool. And because lift is demand-based and we use some subcontracted services, we're able to balance our need of operators by using more subcontracted services or less subcontracted services. However, there was a shortage there. Back in April and May, we were down to 15 operators. We're now up to 19, so we've made some progress there. The other number, though, is up on the breeze. You can see our low occurred in July and August when we were down to 212 operators. We're now at 227. So that's a pretty significant jump. And the good news is there's more coming. Next slide. So this is a list of all of the people that we currently have in training. There's 22 people in training. As you can see, a majority of them are slated to graduate before the end of the year. So we're currently 29 operators short in breeze and 6 operators short in lift. So 35 operators total. But we've got 22 people in the pipeline right now. And we continue to have pretty healthy class sizes every 2 weeks, between 4 and 10 people. Interesting to note, a lot of the people that are coming to us are ex-Amazon drivers and ex-Uber and Lyft drivers, because we finally exceeded the wages that those companies were paying. So we've begun to, attract from the competition. Next slide. So the bus maintenance, unfortunately, this is going a little slower. We were down to 39, we're up to 42, so we had an increase of 3 there. And the servicers, we were down at 15, and we're up to 19. We've made progress. However, there's still a lot of work to do here. We are looking at ways to improve this. Next slide. So MV's had difficulty in recruiting those new mechanics and servicers. We either have folks retiring or folks that are moving on to other employers. The feedback from the people that are moving to other employers are telling us that their wages are simply too low. So MV and NCTD have completed a wage and benefits analysis of the surrounding transit agencies and other employers. And we are exploring alternatives to potentially fund additional compensation for those positions. I expect that I'll probably come back to the board in January or February with a report on what we're going to be doing there. Next slide. So in terms of breeze service restoration, you may recall that we made some cuts in April of 22 because we just simply didn't have the head count to operate all the service that we wanted to. Because we've been doing so well with the recruitment efforts and the hiring efforts, we are looking at phasing back some of the service in April of 23. Not all of it, but some of it. And we're going to be basing the decision on what service to put back on a variety of things. Largely the scale of the reduction. So how big of a cut we made to that route in the first place, how many times we have a full bus on that route now, the average passenger loads that we're seeing on the route, customer complaints that we're getting, also the operational feasibility. Some routes are shorter than others, some routes are longer than others. And so adding service back to shorter routes is easier because it takes less operators, whereas the longer route takes more operators. We're also looking at things like the number of schools that route serves, because school ridership has jumped off the charts thanks to the Youth Opportunity Pass, but also the focus that we put on schools in general this year has paid a lot of dividends. A lot of our full buses are the result of school trippers. And then the last one is just the social vulnerability data that we have on each one of those routes. So we're working to scenario plan various restoration options for April of 23 and October of 23. And my coworkers from service planning will be back in January, I believe, to share the plans for those service restoration. Next slide. And I'm available for any questions if you have any.
Thank you. Before I move to board questions, Suhail, do we have any public comments on this item?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. At this time, public registration to speak on this item will end. Okay, look, I have lots of hands, so I'm going to start at that end. Board Member Contreras.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I will continue to advocate for this, which is our bus operators are critical to our mission, and we have land that we're going to be developing. And part of that development is affordable housing. And when we look at area median income, our bus operators, their wages are still falling within the need for affordable housing. So I really believe that we have a really good opportunity, and looking at our needs for mechanics and services as well. I really believe that we have a great opportunity to fold into a comprehensive benefit package, affordable housing on NCTD property. And it could be something where there's a minimum requirement for years of service, where that kicks in. But in order for us to meet demand and increase frequency, we're going to have to continue to be competitive. And it's really good to hear that our delta is decreasing and that we are now in a space where we're competitive with some of these other businesses like Amazon. But I want to continue to ensure that we don't run into a situation where we're at 20, that, delta of 20, delta of, 15, and we can never get back to where we need to be. When it comes to frequency, I'm going to say the 303 again, because I'm so familiar with that route. There are times, and it's great. The Youth Opportunity Pass is incredible, and I want to continue to see that become permanent. But also at the same time, there is such a demand for public transit on our Breeze system that I have been in the bus when it matches up with school hours for these school trips. And I haven't been able to get out of the bus very, very easily because there are so many students, right? I've witnessed, a mom with her baby having to stand up, right? I've seen people just trying to get in and smush in, and we don't have any kind of articulated buses, right? We don't have the opportunity at our transit centers to at Vista Transit Center, at least, to have an articulated bus because of the infrastructure. So increasing frequency on some of these routes, including the 303, is absolutely critical. And yeah, so that's all I'm going to have to say on it, but I will continue to advocate for affordable housing for our bus operators, and I'm going to fold in our service and mechanics as well.
Thank you, Board Member Jenkins.
Yes, thank you for the update. Appreciate it. A couple questions. It looks like the training time period is about 2 to 2.5 months. I remember with the previous presentation, there was discussion that while we may have X number in training, I think right now is 22, but some drop off during the process for whatever reason. Is there a certain percentage? Do we expect a percentage of these to drop out of the training and not complete it? Or is there not a?
Yeah, there's always certainly a risk of folks dropping out of the training. The folks that are in training right now, most of them have made it past some of the more difficult stages and are now in the process of, learning the routes.
Okay.
It's possible to lose people at every stage of training. Typically speaking, we lose about 50% of the people that, once they enter training, about 50% of them graduate and the other 50% either don't graduate or choose to leave. It's tough to say how many of those 22 will actually graduate. I don't have an exact ratio for you.
Okay. And then what is BTW?
Behind the wheel.
Behind the wheel. I thought it was by the way. Okay, thanks. And then another question about the schools. Do you have discussions? Does anybody have discussions with each of the districts in our sphere as far as how to entice some of those students to ride the bus? Or is that just totally?
So our service planning department actually reaches out to every school that's along every middle school and high school that's along our whatever route. And in some cases we have those supplemental routes that serve the schools. So the service planning department's in close coordination with those schools at the beginning of every school year to determine when the school, the bells are, so we can make sure that the buses are there at the beginning and end of school and any early release days that they have or late start days. But in addition, at that same time, they're provided material that they can hand out to the students that talk about the Youth Opportunity Pass and the bus schedule that we will be running. So that's handed out to students from the school itself.
Okay, great. I had conversation one night this week with a parent, and he was so excited that his student can ride down Mission, a few stops to San Marcos Middle, and then ride over to San Marcos High. And he said they're going to get there a lot quicker than for him to drive them. So thank you. Thanks again.
Okay. Any questions from, getting to Board Member Bhat Patel, actually Vice Chair Bhat Patel.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Just a few questions. So we're currently 35 operators short, right? And of those, you said there's 22 in the pipeline. So, okay. And the class sizes you're saying is between 4 to 6 people, but it could, based on, I know Board Member Jenkins also mentioned this, we could have drop off. So do we have any sort of time frame as to when we think we'll be able to get back up to that 35 operators?
Based on the current projections, and if we assume the loss of 50% of the students that actually enter, and if the class sizes remain the same, the numbers play out that we would be fully staffed sometime in April.
Okay.
But again, there's a lot of variables there that I don't want to, I'm not throwing out a guarantee that we're going to be fully staffed.
Totally.
That's just the projection.
And that's why you had mentioned April 2023 for the Breeze operation.
Right. And that would only be a partial restoration in April 2023 because of the time that it takes to build schedules and bid the routes and do all of the other administrative work. So there's a certain lag time between, because we don't want to make an assumption that I'm going to have operators to operate the routes when I may not. And so we wouldn't want to put out to the public that we were going to run that service and then not have operators to fill it.
Yeah. And I think one of the other questions I had, it's interesting that we're attracting people from the private sector, right? Amazon, Uber, Lyft. And I guess, you know, I wouldn't necessarily have seen them as competition. So it was interesting to hear, you know, you say that they're competition, obviously for wages purposes, but I was curious in terms of training. Are we having to put in more time to train folks that are coming in from that sector, and what does that look like in terms
Yes, so
of
we
training?
recently overhauled the entire new hire bus operator training program. We saw that there were some deficiencies in terms of time spent on customer service, time spent on technologies on the bus, time spent on learning some of the routes. So NCTD and MV recently overhauled it to make it quite a bit longer than what it was. So now we were spending between 4 and 6 weeks, and now we're spending between 8 to 10 weeks for training. But part of that was, you know, a reinforcement of customer service skills, of learning the technologies on the bus, you know, basic driving techniques, and then going into learning all the routes. So there's, you know, there's more training going on now than there was before. But the goal of that obviously is to take someone we can take somebody in theory who's never driven a commercial vehicle at all and turn them into a bus operator, you know, with that right program of training.
Nice. I won't ask you to go through all of that today, but I'm curious. I want to know what that looks like, just for curiosity's sake. And I think I had one more question. Yeah, I mean, in terms of our levels of services, I think you mentioned it, but just to reiterate, how would it overall impact filling any of the gaps if we were to get fully back in operational? Right now, obviously, we have some of them that we've had to cut, but if we got, you know, in that best case scenario, got everyone up to speed and we were there, what would that mean for our levels of service?
So there were 3 routes that are our most frequent: the 302, the 303, and the 350. The 302 and 303 run between Oceanside and the Vista Transit Center. They just take different routes. And then the 350 runs between Escondido Transit Center and the Del Lago Transit Center, which is in South Escondido. All 3 of those routes ran roughly every 15 minutes, some a little bit more frequently, some a little less frequently before the service cuts. Those would all 3 be restored back to running every 15 minutes. Right now we have them every 30 or so. And then the 101, we had some peak periods that we ran more frequently than every 30 minutes. It was only about every 20. We would restore those peak periods back if we could. And then the 351 and 352 had some peak periods that were less than 30 minutes. They were like 15 and 20. So we could restore that back as well, because those were cut as well. So and then we made some adjustments to routes like the 332. We just kind of smoothed out the frequency of the route rather than, you know, hard cuts there, but we can look at making those adjustments again. And coincidentally, going back to your comments about the overcrowding, those are also, you know, because they were running so frequently and now they aren't, those are the ones where when we get around school time, it's really rough to even get on the bus, let alone find a seat. So yeah, I mean, it was a good 20% of the service that got cut in April.
And so it seems like there obviously has been an impact, and in terms of impact, hopefully it will allow for folks to have more flexibility in terms of when they'll be able to take those. Okay,
Exactly.
great. Thank you.
Thank you, Damon. Great report. It's positive. It's moving in the right direction. That's good to hear. It was a little scary a few months ago. So thank you very much. And nice questions, board. Much appreciated. Our final presentation item is an update on the North County Comprehensive Multi-Corridor Plan. Lillian Dwardy, Director of Planning and Development, will introduce this item. Lillian? You're on.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and board members. The North County Comprehensive Multi-Corridor Plan is a focused transportation planning document with the ultimate goals of reducing travel times, providing more mobility choices for short trips, and providing access to those with limited mobility options. Significant in the North County Plan is the role that the Sprinter hybrid rail service provides to the planning area. Critical NCTD projects such as double tracking, transit-oriented redevelopment, and other key projects such as the Buena Creek Grade Separation Project are highlighted in this report. And CTD staff participated alongside other cities and the county as part of this multi-year, multi-agency collaborative effort. Leading this study and here with us today are from Caltrans Department of Transportation, Alan Kossip, North County Corridor Director, and Cream Scarlett, North County Corridor Project Manager. From Sandag, we have Brian Lane, Senior Transit Planner. They are here today to present an overview and recommendations of the North County CMCP. Alan?
Thank you, Lily. Next slide. As Lillian pointed out, this has been a multi-year effort, and it's been a joint agency effort spearheaded by both Caltrans and Sandag, but in collaboration with all of the cities that are in the corridor and NCTD. Today, we wanted to spend a little bit of time just explaining what is a CMCP, why do we even do them, sort of what's the value to this region, drill in a little bit in terms of what are the constraints and challenges and opportunities that we found in the study. And then, probably of the most interest is, what does the project portfolio look like that we're recommending for the next 30 plus years? And then finally, we'll wrap up with implementation and next steps. Next slide. So when we talk about the North County CMCP, it's the 5 cities along the corridor. So Oceanside, Carlsbad, Vista, San Marcos, Escondido, a little bit of the County of San Diego as well. And it's interesting corridor. You guys all know this, but I think a lot of folks south of us may not recognize that it's 20% of the population of the county. It's 20% of the jobs in the county, right? So it's a really important, area for San Diego to be as vibrant as we are. And in addition to what the existing transportation challenges we have, we also know that another 100,000 folks are coming to this area in the next 20, 30 years, and also 100,000 jobs as well. So, we not only have existing transportation challenges, we have future transportation challenges. And so the CMCPs are really an opportunity to sort of integrate all of the modes that we're all working on into sort of a seamless door-to-door transportation system. And the CMCPs really are becoming an expectation both at a state and federal level in order for competing for money. So they really want to see that we're all working together and developing that integrated plan. Next slide. And so, it's important to point out that we're not recreating the wheel. We know NCTD has a robust planning process. Sandag has a robust planning process, and so does Caltrans. And so what's different about the CMCP? It's really building on the success of the North Coast Corridor plan that we did several years ago, when we looked at Interstate 5 and Coaster and brought them all together. It's bringing all of our plans together into one plan, into one comprehensive integrated plan. And it does 2 things. It's the stepping stone, it's the bridge to getting into project implementation, because we can set up prioritizations, but it also informs future phases of the RTP or of the different agencies up and down the corridor, their planning processes. So it's sort of a very iterative process. And with that, I'll pass it over to Brian, who will, I have one more. I'm sorry. Next slide, please. So what are some of the challenges we saw in the corridor? I think most, you're very familiar with these. I think a lot of them are very common to all of us in the transportation business. I'll highlight a couple that are probably unique to this corridor. One is just the distance that the regional facilities such as Sprinter and 78 are to the major destinations like Camp Pendleton or Carlsbad Job Center. And so when we think about a sort of a door-to-door trip, it's like, how do we bridge that distance between the regional facilities and the key destinations? And also when you look at this corridor, you realize there's a big distance between the major north-south corridors, 5, 15, and Coaster. So the arterial system in the cities really take a disproportionate share compared to other places around the county. So now with that, I will pass it over to Brian.
Thanks, Alan. So next slide. So the plan, and like Alan mentioned, over the last couple of years, we've been working on this. We're building on the regional plan, the 5 big moves from that. We kind of broke out the 5 big moves into these strategies, including, breaking out Sprinter from transit, high frequency transit as well. Active transportation was one of our main strategies, working with our active and pedestrian folks. Smart arterials and intersections was a part of the complete corridors in the regional plan. So that with the regional smart highway capacity management, mobility as a service, that was flex fleets out of the plan. And then TISMO and ICM, that's the smart signaling type work that we would get. We also included reconnecting communities, really trying to focus on, with this corridor, it includes all the cities, the county, the transit district, Caltrans, the freeways, trying to ensure that between all of them that we can work together and connect well. On the next slide, so taking those strategies, we then started trying to focus the plan a little more. And so then we started focusing that into our strategic anchors. Our anchors were the parts of the county or this region that we knew we could kind of tie together a little bit more. I think you can click one more on this slide. So first was the regional spines, and that's more of your long haul type corridor parts of the system, the 78, the 76. I think if you click once more, the regional spines also included the Sprinter as well, because that kind of connects from one end to the other. Our hubs, which was kind of out of the regional plan as well, the mobility hubs, we know these are these areas that the cities are already starting to build up and focus transit-oriented development or other focused housing, things like that. So we know that those are important areas. And a mobility hub isn't just one transit station in an area. It might be a station or two, and then the areas around that folks are trying to get in and out or around that part of the corridor. And then lastly, our anchors included the boulevards, and those are essentially most of the arterials that are north-south in this corridor that are helping to alleviate the pressures off the 78 and the 76 over in Escondido, a little more east-west and north-south for those as well. So on our next slide, taking these into a plan, we then had, like this is an example of one of our strategies was the Sprinter strategy. Took some elements out of the regional plan, worked closely with the folks at NCTD. We had 6 grade separations in the regional plan. We added 3 more proposed with this. Started focusing on broke out the Sprinter corridor into different segments, a west, middle, and an east segment to try and focus double tracking efforts, then so we could increase frequencies either on part of it or the whole part of it to start at least to get to the 15 minutes that NCD wants. And then ultimately with the dream of the regional plan to maybe a 10-minute, by 2050, but that's a long-term goal. Moving on, an example of one of our anchors or our focuses was the inland mobility example. This was near 15 and 78. So of the strategies that I mentioned before, this incorporates a few of these strategies: the transit, the highway, flexible fleets, Sprinter, and active transportation. And included in this sort of bundle of projects that we would look to incorporate as part of the CMCP efforts would be, the I-15 SR-78 managed lanes connectors, some double tracking on the Sprinter, rail to rail connections or via Barham. Really trying to work on the ICM, the integrated corridor management systems, community connections, really focusing especially in Escondido and on the east sides of Vista San Marcos, getting connections with that, and then the local access that could be provided within that. And then moving on, and then again into the Sprinter example of the types of things that we would have within the Sprinter, really focusing on station access improvements. And I know NCD is doing a lot of work on that already. NC also is doing flexible fleets, but really trying to make that a big part of getting to that station so folks can then take the Sprinter to their final destinations. Double tracking is a big part of getting the Sprinter to be able to move more quickly and more frequently. So, and have more reliability on-time performance. Again, increase those frequencies as soon as we can. And then, what we've been hearing a lot is really working on the crossing improvements and then grade separations where feasible. And these are the tough ones, trying to decide which grade separations we'd want to focus on first. And again, we probably, as we work through deciding which bundles we may apply for with the state funding, we would then work with NCTD to decide which groups of grade separations would be best to move forward over the others. And then ultimately in the regional plan and and the discussions with NCTD, there is the extension of the Sprinter south to the Vio Rancho Parkway. So roll-up summary by the 5 big moves of the regional plan. The total cost is about plus or minus $5.5 billion, minus plus or minus $300 million. That's including capital and operating costs. That's over the 30-year life of the CMCP. Between the various modes or the 5 big moves, it ranges, but this is a good kind of a high level estimate of what these would cost. And then lastly, I love this example, trying to show what the improved access performance could be if we made these types of improvements. So this first part of this map shows the existing typical access via transit and walking in the PM peak and what you could get within a 30-minute time frame today. And if you click, you now will see what you could get when you have the CMCP's efforts. You can see how much further someone could get within that 30 minutes. And this is just an example coming out of, I believe that's San Marcos, right? The East Carlsbad. That's one of the examples, and we've done this for multiple parts of the corridor. And it kind of looks the same, that blob gets a much bigger when you include all of the elements out of the CMCP. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kareem.
Thank you, Brian. All right, so the document proposes a number of improvements, but we wanted to focus in on areas that had transportation deficiencies, as well as a strong origin and destination connection. And one of those areas that had a strong connection was the Coastal Gateway Bundle, which includes improvements to the 578, includes double tracking between Oceanside and Vista of the Sprinter corridor. It includes the completion of the Inland Rail Trail in this segment as well. And it also includes improvements to local arterials such as Mission Avenue, Oceanside Boulevard, as well as Vista Way. Next slide. Now going to the other side of the corridor, looking at the Inland Gateway. So this is essentially the same gateway that Brian was talking to. And this gateway includes the improvements to the 1578 managed lanes. It includes double tracking between Escondido Transit Center and Nordal for the Sprinter corridor. It also includes a component, a Class 1 bike facility that connects the Inland Rail Trail to Cal State San Marcos. And it also includes improvements to the mobility hubs in San Marcos and Escondido. Next slide. And then lastly, we have a bundle that focuses on improving the local arterials, the north-south ones toward the middle of the corridor. And in this bundle, we would focus more in on the technology, implementation of technology along these corridors or along these routes, as well as high frequency transit and protected bike lanes along these routes. So there's a number of key efforts that are already underway that dovetail or incorporate elements of the CMCP. One of those is NCTD's TOD program, as well as mobility hubs, or the implementation of mobility hubs in the general plans of local jurisdictions. Currently, NCTD is also beginning to look at a 15-minute service study with the Sprinter, which dovetails into the CMCP. The Inland Gateway Bundle, specifically the 1578 project, which is an environmental review. And then also the redefining of land use and mobility through general plans. Like we said before, I think the city of Oceanside and the city of San Marcos are currently revising their general plans. The NCTD study and reliability study, which is underway. And then also traffic signal technologies and deployment of those within the corridor. Next slide. So some of the policy recommendations that we have was first prioritizing early successes and short-term implementations, things that we can get like a quick win on. Second is integrate and collaborate, basically aligning people and the processes in order for us to be more successful in securing funding for some of these improvements. And then lastly, create an innovative test bed of transportation tools and technologies within the corridor. Okay. So the next steps for the document is we're going to release the draft version of the document in the first week of January, followed by a 30-day review, but I think that's actually getting pushed to a 45-day. And then a presentation to the TC in February. And I guess finalization of the document in March. And then in April, we're hoping to initiate, I know it says a subcommittee, but I think we're looking more like a working group for North County in order to kind of work on the projects that are presented in this document. Okay. With that, thank you very much.
Is there a wrap up on this, or are we just
We are available for any questions.
terrific? Before we move to board comments or questions, Suhel, do we have any public comments on this item?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. At this time, public registration to speak on this item will end. Board, are there any questions for our speakers? Okay, I'll start again at that end. Board Member Contreras.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I do have a few comments and questions. I think it's going to be incredibly important, as we all do, that we increase the frequency on the Sprinter. When I need to get down to San Diego, I either have to figure out how to connect to the coaster, which also needs to be more frequent. I know that we made it more frequent, but it needs to be more frequent if we're going to have more frequent Sprinter. But if I can't make it to the coaster, then I have to go to Escondido Transit Center and either catch the 280 bus or the 235. It would be my dream that from the city of Vista, I could get on some kind of a rapid bus and have like a BRT from Vista to San Diego. I think that would be incredible. When it comes to managed lanes, I have a question. Do we have any current, because I haven't been on them and I haven't taken all the routes yet on the bus, but do we have any bus routes that go on our freeways right now on the 5?
On the 5, no, we have them on the 15 so from Escondido all the way to downtown. And then a little bit on the 805, the one out of South Bay goes into downtown.
But we don't have anything right now on the 78 or the 5. So when it comes to managed lanes, are we anticipating that we're going to have a BRT on the 5 and the 78?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. And then that would be, are we talking about transit only lanes or are these a hybrid?
Probably hybrid, kind of like the 15. Idea is that transit gets priority. So always ensuring, like on the 15 express lanes, the tolls on those are meant to be, they're increased to ensure that the transit gets free flow, essentially. So that would be kind of the concept when we talk about managed lanes is transit would get priority. And then if you have carpools or tolling or whatever else, that's secondary.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I love the getting on the 235 or the 280 and using those that managed lane system. I can get off on center line, and connect elsewhere. If need be. So do we anticipate that because I know that it could take a long time to build some of this infrastructure. Do we anticipate that we could do something like a bus on shoulder pilot before this infrastructure gets put
Well,
into place?
I'll
If
let
there's
Alex-
any room on the, I don't.
So we're piloting right now on the 94, the bus on shoulder. It's taken a lot of effort with the CHP and Caltrans blessing that. And so we're only in a pilot for that right now. It's not actually part of law to allow that. So they're allowing a pilot. We're hoping we show the success of that, and then that becomes something of the future. I don't know if you wanted to.
No, I think you pegged it. I back up, a little bit to BRT in general. I mean, they sort of go hand in hand. The infrastructure improvement has to occur at the same time the BRT, in a perfect world. So when we're looking at 1578, that adds 3 miles of express lanes, managed lanes, but it would also include the BRT with the idea of extending from 15 to Cal State San Marcos and to key destinations. So that's the focus of this study, is sort of breaking it out and connecting key origins and destinations, and Cal State San Marcos is one of those as a front hitter. 78 in general, since you hit it dead on, it's so narrow, it may not be the same ability to put buses on shoulders as we have like on Interstate 5 or something like that. So that is a concern, but we'll keep looking at it.
Awesome. And I don't know if there's a way to expedite it. We have a good amount of general purpose lanes, and maybe being able to take one of those general purpose lanes that we currently have, because I don't know if the idea is to expand the freeway. So the idea is to take one of the general purpose lanes and convert it to the hybrid of transit and something else, or what are we?
So,
I'm just trying to figure out what we're trying to do, because if we have to expand, we may not have right of way, and then that's going to take forever, and then the cost is going to be super high.
So like on 5, we added a lane, and then the long-term plan is now to convert the second lane, right? So you'll end up with 2 express lanes in the middle, 1 added, 1 conversion. When we look at 78, we're not far enough along in the studies to, we've looked at both ends. So we're working on the 2 ends. I think that's the important thing, because we find most of our trips, 70% of the trips from the 2 interstates get off within the first 3-4 miles. So we're really targeting that. We'll study conversions and we'll study add, and we'll just try to figure out which one's the best solution in each case.
Okay, awesome. And then there was a mention of focusing on active transportation, but I'm curious what that focus means in dollars, because to my understanding, we're not actually spending that much money on active transportation. So is it really a focus, or is it kind of like a scramble?
No, it's a focus, and it's on the slide, the Rollup Summary slide, it didn't actually have the active transportation broken out, but I think that's in the actual draft document. Yeah, we're not spending a whole lot right now, but we don't have a lot of funding right now. So all of this is assuming we're going to get more in new funding to do the types of things. And no matter what, we would bundle these things. So active transportation would definitely be a part of any of the bundles, because I think to be successful, especially for the SB1 state dollars, you're going to have to show a good array of projects. You can't just widen freeways by itself and expect to win. It's going to need to be all of it.
Right. Okay. That's good to know. Yeah, I would love to see, because I think we're like at 3-4% active transportation funding right now at Sandag. So even doubling that would be incredible. And I wanted to offer some comments on grade separation. Obviously, I would love the whole corridor to get grade separation. But you asked about, you had a comment about trying to figure out where to focus and prioritize the grade separation. I would just offer a recommendation that I've seen where there's a lot of emergency services that cross the Sprinter line. One would be at the Vista Transit Center. We have one of our most active fire stations that has to cross the Sprinter. That's on Vista Village and Santa Fe. Fire Station 6 is just right on that. And I've spoken to our firefighters, and they even have a code that says train, right? So I want to get some more data on that. But then there's another one, and that's at the Nordal station. And that intersection also has a lot of emergency services that go through there because of the hospital that's right next to there. So, all right. Well, thank you so much. I could probably go on forever and ever, but I'm done for now. And I'll see if any of my colleagues have any other questions, comments. Thanks.
Thank you. Board Member Jenkins.
Yes, thank you. So I think there was mention this is a 35-year plan. Is it done every 35 years or what is the timing when you say 35 years? And as you get into the projects, into the plan, is it reevaluated as you go along because priorities could change? You could set a priority and all of a sudden whatever something changes locally and it drops off the priority list.
Right on. I mean, we completely agree. These are relatively new documents in the state and the federal side. So this is really sort of the first iteration of these. They're meant to align as closely as possible as with the regional transportation plan because they really are feeding that in some ways. And then the RTP feeds this process. And then as they change, so does the CMCP, as well as the city general plans, right? As development areas change and focuses change. So it is definitely a living document. I would say there is no specific interval. When we say 35 years, it was meant to match the RTP. So it's essentially 2050. But yeah, we would revisit them sort of ongoing and certainly not every 35 years.
Okay.
And I would say real quick, I mean, one of the values in working together, and even though the region might be, in a lull in terms of funding, the state is picking up speed in terms of some of the active transportation grants and that sort of thing. So by working together, we can really focus in on those areas of emphasis that maybe we can take some of that lead. So I think that's another value of these.
Okay. And then on page 6, where you talked about the smart signaling, I'm guessing you're talking about the signaling of where the roads cross the rail line. What smart signaling are you talking about? Because I know we've talked about trying to coordinate city signals with Caltrans, and that's not feasible. So what smart signaling are you referring to?
It is feasible. Don't take that negative attitude. I can make it work.
Okay. Yeah. I'm gonna quote you.
So the world does change. We are a little slow.
Yes.
Part of the problem obviously is getting the controllers and proprietary controllers to talk, but we're breaking down that barrier.
Okay.
And we've got a number of pilots around the county to pilot some stuff, specifically along 76 this month. We're supposed to be lighting up some adaptive signals in sort of East Oceanside. We're working with the city of Carlsbad right now to do next generation signals on all the overcrossings between Palomar Port Road and 78. And they've got smart signal technology as it relates to pedestrians, so they can sense the pedestrians there. If it looks like someone's going to run the red light, they can hold the pedestrian. So that those applications will continue to grow as the technology grows in the vehicles. Like in an ideal world, we can talk directly to the vehicles. We can do transit priority, and a lot of the vehicles aren't there yet, but we're sort of setting up the infrastructure so that we can do plug and play. And so, yeah, we have some solutions to blend in a lot better with the city. And I agree with you. 2-3 years ago, we would have said no. But now I think we're past even maybe. We're like, we can make this work.
Okay, good. Well, I'm sure San Marcos on San Marcos Boulevard would love to volunteer to pilot something.
We've
for
heard,
you.
we've definitely.
Let's see. Page 9, you talked about the Sprinter double tracking. I just want to confirm, I think my understanding is the loop does not get double tracked. Is that correct? Or does it eventually?
Well, first, I'll just commend these guys are great, have been great to work with. And that is the loop is active discussion.
Okay.
About what could be done in terms of the need to double track and to improve the speeds as it relates to how fast we can operate on that loop. So that is absolutely on the table.
Okay. And then next question is, and you talked about this briefly. This is great to have the plan. Where's the money do we know if it's coming? Is it out there? Or are we just told, have this plan, you have to have a plan, but they're not going to give us any money? Right.
So I'll just chime in. You guys can talk about your aspects of the project. But what is happening in terms of for NCTD with this collaboration is significant. You can't actually get funding until you actually have a project.
Mhm.
And for our discretionary programs for which we compete, the projects and the phasing and breaking out these into discrete, digestible, fundable elements put us in a really good position to be able to make incremental improvements, which was NCTD's approach. We would love for somebody to drop $1 billion on me personally first, and then NCTD maybe thereafter. But we don't view that with a high level of likelihood. And so what we have looked at is incremental improvements that one could make. Theoretically, you could look at Vista to Escondido and put that on a 15-minute headway as a phase one. You could do other incremental improvements that really help move the line forward. And that is the approach we're actually taking with the Sprinter. In fact, right now, phase one for us is signal system upgrade, because everything is going to be premised upon first us getting our signal system upgrade. And that actually is already underway in terms of a project to define kind of the 30% plan for that. We have an excellent project delivery method, and we are waiting to hear about the federal budget, because if the federal budget gets approved with a targeted appropriation to NCTD, we're in business on that phase.
Okay, and then on page 11, where you gave all the costs, those are just this North County corridor, nothing else. Okay, I just wanted to confirm that. On page 16, where you talked about the general plans, as you mentioned, a couple of our cities are working through that now. So when this draft is ready to go out, does it get, it's going to be sent to everybody, I'm assuming, but are you going to actively seek more feedback from those maybe going through their general plans, because they might need to mesh together in certain areas?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like Alan mentioned, all these are feeding each other. It's like a cyclical, like even with the regional plan, we just started, or we're starting the next regional plan. We just, our board just voted on it last year. We're already starting on the 2025 plan. This CMCP is there's already some things we've learned out of this CMCP that will go into that next plan. That next plan will then feed maybe a draft or a version that we update this CMCP with. Working with the city planners and engineers over the last couple of years has been amazing. We've both learned from each other on that one. And so I believe, they've had some aha moments on things that they could change with their plans. We had some great aha moments as well of like, what should we put in the CMCP? And then what should we tell the regional plan folks on what they should put in? So does that kind of make sense? It's all feeding each other. And ideally everything gets a little better as we keep working with each other.
Right. Okay. I think I want to go back to the 7815 connectors. Any sort of crystal ball as to, when that might be happening? Because as you know, San Marcos is funding some of the design for the Woodland Park interchange. So do we have any?
So we're working on the draft environmental document. We hope to have the draft environmental document out late next year. And design is funded. Construction is not funded. So probably in 2026 timeframe, it'll be shovel ready. But we all have to work together to find the construction funding. And I think that's, to emphasize what Matt Tucker was saying is this, also all the cycles of funding happen at sort of different wavelengths, right? And so regions go through periods of, they've got sales tax measures and then the state's poor or the feds are poor. I would say right now, the state and the federal government with IIJA is that's a whole new emphasis. And so I think this helps us put priority, because one of the things that works against us when we work in a corridor is when we've got lots of great ideas and then we can't get sort of consensus on where do we want to focus and work together as a group. Like we can support you, you can support us. And I think that's one of the great things that come out of here. If we can really focus in the next couple of years, I think there's lots of opportunity, maybe not locally, but state and federal.
So would we likely I'm just gonna throw this out there. Will we likely not see any piece of this happen for 5 years?
Of 1578?
No, anything in this plan?
No, I think there's things actively moving right now.
Okay,
And so I think there's lots of opportunities for stuff. It may be smaller. It may
Right.
not be those $300-400 million jobs like 1578, but I think there's other good wins.
okay. And then, this is outside of our region, but Temecula traffic feeds into our North County, very heavily into the 78 and all that. Do we have any discussion about that? I know it's not our region up there, but do we have any discussion about how to help that? Or do you see the connectors really being
So
key?
I'll let my brother chime in here, right? The largest challenge we have right now in the state is vehicle miles traveled, right? So we're, how do we address transportation and vehicle miles traveled at the same time? And the Temecula trip is a lot of land use and affordability issues. And so, and that's why when Brian and Kareem talked about areas of focus, the mobility hubs is a important focus because from a California standpoint, instead of like providing them more capacity, we'd like to figure out how to bring them closer
Right.
to their jobs. And so there's more of that in the document than there is, let's add capacity on 15.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Okay, we're just going to keep moving down the dais. Director Weiss.
Thank you. So it would appear that the single largest component as far as expenditure of funds is going to be the double tracking and grade separation of the Sprinter. Looking at your roll-up costs. So my question, I get that you're going to have more frequent service, but what do you have a projection of the increase in ridership of the Sprinter? If all of this were done tomorrow, what would you expect the increase in ridership to be?
I'm trying to remember what our projections show, but I think Sprinter gets up into the 30,000 a day, up to 40,000 a day riderships by 2050. Because we don't we do the modeling on the year we think it would open.
And so so for roughly $6 billion, we're doubling, a little more than doubling the capacity.
Correct.
Okay.
And what was the $6 billion is the whole
thing.
whole CMCP managed lanes, active transportation, right?
Okay.
Everything. And then, I mean, the rapids and the rest of the breeze service and all that would have big increases in ridership as well.
So those will likely be a higher priority because they'll be more fundable than grade separated cross, because Oceanside needs every one of their crossings separated. We have a higher priority than Vista. Anyway, okay, thank you.
No fighting on the dais.
Yeah,
Mr. Tucker?
Yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about exactly what Board Member Weiss was commenting upon. So there are different plans, and Sandak has a big and bold plan. Our plan gets us to what we need in terms of the 15-minute hitways at a significantly lower cost, capital cost, and I'm happy to provide that number to you. One of the bigger emphasis that we have is making sure that we harmonize the rail operations with all community operations, including automobile. And so to a large degree, we are strongly advocating grade separation projects as an additional thing above and beyond, because we could get to the 15-minute in a fairly cost-effective way. But I think at the end for the region, it would not be the best thing not to address these needed grade separations. And so we've been prioritizing, working with the county, working with the cities to make sure that we begin that whole effort of identifying, because this is like the long-term permanent solution, 100 years, 200 years. What does it want? What do we want it to look like? And so from a practical point of view from NCTD, the capital improvements that we need to make to get to 15-minute hitway, I think we had put together a program that was under $100 million to be able to do that. But that didn't address the grade separation versus what I think Sandak's program is a little bit more ambitious, with improvements that we would say, great if you got the money, but our program is a lot more modest. But then now if we add the needed improvements to harmonize and mitigate community impacts, then the grade separations need to be addressed.
Director Hensy?
Yeah, just a quick question. To build on the question that Board Member Contreras had about the ATP spending. How are we designing these ATP upgrades? Are they mostly just paint on the road, or are they class 1 bike lanes, protected bike lanes? What's sort of the ethos that we're going towards in the design level here?
I think it's a mix. A lot of it we got from the cities themselves, anyways, with their plans, and then Sandag's plans as well. But ideally, separated bikeways are the ideal, but they're not always feasible. So when feasible, I think those are included, and you have to get down to the specific corridors to find it out. But that's always our ideal.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that I liked how you phrased it. The lull in funding regionally is definitely true, but then we've got all this SB1 money for projects that are really well designed. So my hope is that we're planning for these SB1 projects that are off-road, that are class 1, that are really safe and attractive to getting people out of their cars and onto their other choices of transportation. Thank you.
Great comments so far. Director Quirk.
Great. Thank you for the presentation. I've got questions. I'll share a couple of facts first, but then I'd love just to answer or ask a couple of questions. I want to touch on what Board Member Weiss first touched on as far as ridership. So just to share a few stats, the Sprinter ridership, the most recent monthly report, that's why I asked for it to be pulled, down 50% from pre-pandemic levels. The coaster's running down about 40% from pre-pandemic levels. I used to live in New York City. I took the subway every single day. I checked the ridership level today. They have a daily update. They're down about 40% from pre-pandemic levels. Similar across the country, basically. All of these rail lines are struggling pretty significantly. And I would add that the Sprinter and the coaster had seen declines in the years before the pandemic. So this isn't just a pandemic and remote work type of trend. So it does seem like this world of remote work, this post-pandemic world isn't something that is temporary or fleeting. It seems like there's real sustained changes here. The plan, as I understand it at Sandag, was introduced in 2019 before the rise of, say, electric vehicles, and certainly before the pandemic. Is there going to be, as we're looking at this plan, it's evolving over time? I think I've heard you say that at other presentations as well. Is there going to be a recognition, hey, ridership's down a lot for these traditional transit routes across the nation? Do we need to adjust and update our plan based on these remote work trends? And I would describe it as a pretty powerful trend to decentralization, my observation, my word. So when I hear things about plans like mobility hubs, well, if I look at what people are actually doing post-pandemic, it seems like work has gotten decentralized. People are walking, biking, but primarily within their immediate, residence. So I'm a huge believer in kind of active mobility, but my observation is it's kind of, centrally located around a person's home, not so much as a commuting pattern. So there are some comments, some questions there, but are you taking into account ridership and these massive declines across the board in a lot of systems, as I understand it? And this is what you're trying to do with the 30-year plan. We're looking at specifically the North Coast corridor here, but it's also, I think, something that needs to be addressed for the broader county. Thank you.
Yeah, and like the Sandag regional plan, like you mentioned, was started in 2019, kind of pre-COVID, and then passed a year ago. With the next plan, we're going to reevaluate the whole telework and all that. But we're seeing congestion levels almost at or even above some of the pre-pandemic levels on freeways and roads. So we know that's not sustainable, and so we have to start providing alternatives. And down in MTS service area, their ridership levels are at 80% of what they were pre-COVID already. So their comeback is pretty strong. NCDs is getting there as well. So I think the idea is that those will come back, and then as congestion keeps coming up or keeps coming back, that's not sustainable. And even with the, climate and all that we know that we need to start providing alternatives. So definitely with the next regional plan and the CMCP, though, we'll keep reevaluating telework, how much more local commuting there is going on. But as we continue to see congestion on the freeways, though, we realize something has to be done.
Okay. And just another follow-on question. I asked for the ridership numbers for the Mid-Coast trolley. And the projection on day one was about 20,000 incremental new riders for the 11-mile extension, which was open about a year ago. The numbers over the last few months have been running at about 25 or 30% of that. And then the further out projection was about 30,000 riders. So they're running around 5,000 or 6,000. So the actuals are coming in way below what the forecasts were for a $2.3 billion project that was completed just last year. So I think that's a pretty powerful data point to consider as we're evaluating some of these plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you everyone for your comments. Thank you to Lillian, to Alan, to Brian, and to Kareem for your presentation. Very informative. Great questions from the board, great comments. I really like hearing the focus on a collaborative process between the organizations and agencies and local jurisdictions. So keep it up. Thanks. Next on our agenda is approval of the minutes for the November 17th, 2022 regular board meeting. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Motion by
Second.
Hensy, second by Contreras. Please call the vote.
Okay.
Okay. Press 1 to vote. Yes. Press 2 to vote. Abstain. Press 3 to vote no. I've pressed 11 so far. Should we just call it? Yeah, just go ahead and call the vote.
Just do I. Vice Chair Patel. Board Member Quirk,
Yes.
Board Member Hensy,
Yes.
Board Member McNamara, Board Member Weiss,
Yes.
Board Member Desmond, Board Member Jenkins,
Yes.
Board Chair Edson,
Yes.
Board Member Contreras.
Aye.
On the motion of Board Member Jenkins, seconded by Board Member Contreras to approve the minutes of the regular board meeting of November 17, motion passes.
I think the motion was by Board Member Hensy and second by Board Member Jenkins in the fight over there in that corner. She was. So with that, there are 17 items on today's consent agenda. So have any members of the public requested that any consent items be pulled?
None other than the ones that already were mentioned.
Okay, so at this time, we're ending the public registration to speak on this item. And I understand that Board Member Quirk wishes to pull items 5 and 12. Is that correct? Okay, with that, anyone else? Not seeing any hands raised. May I have a motion to approve consent items 4, 6 through 11, and 13 through 20?
So moved by Contreras.
Second.
Motion by Contreras, second by Bhat Patel. Please, everyone, should we try it again?
Yeah, I think it does.
Okay. I think they're still sleeping. Okay, can we do a simple aye, nay?
Yeah, simple I know.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Okay.
On the motion of Board Member Contreras, seconded by Board Member Vice Chair Patel, to approve consent items 4, 6 to 11, 13 to 20, motion passes.
Thank you. And Board Member Quirk, items 5 and 12 will be moved to the end of the agenda. This brings us to other business. Damon Blythe, Chief Operations Officer Bus, is back before us to present item 21. Today's presentation and request for authorization is a follow-up to a presentation that we received at our regular board meeting in July. During that meeting, Mr. Blythe spoke about future considerations related to bus operations to support increased ridership, customer satisfaction, and other goals. Damon, you have our attention on this very critical agenda item. Thanks.
Thank you. Hello again. So as board chair mentioned in July, you received an update regarding the strategic alternatives we have for the management and operations of operations and maintenance for the Breeze Lift and Flex services. We have concluded our comprehensive review of those strategic alternatives, and we're presenting the board today with a recommended strategy for the resumption of direct operations. There are some important things to note about today's recommendation. Number one, it doesn't commit the board to a final decision. Number two, the action that we're requesting today is a framework that authorizes us to proceed with a more detailed analysis, complete related activities, and provide financial assurance that resuming direct authorizations is financially sustainable. The board will make the decision in the future and will be able to rely upon contemporaneous information. So just a little history, the bus operations was transitioned to contract in 2010. We've had two contractors since then. First Transit was here from 2010 to 2017, and we're currently contracted with MV from 2017 to now. There is a small team of NCTD employees that manage the contractor's performance. The contractor in this case is responsible for providing parts, supplies, and labor. NCTD provides the rolling stock, the non-revenue vehicles, the maintenance and operations facilities, fuel, and most of the utilities. The base term of the current contract with MV is set to expire June 30th, 2024. So those are the three strategic alternatives that we presented to you in July. The first two have now been combined into one. The first alternative is to extend the current contract by exercising the 3-year option with MV that's built into the contract. That would take us through 2027, and then we would undertake a procurement during that time to onboard a new contractor, incorporating lessons learned from this contract and the first one. The second option is to resume direct management and bring bus operations and maintenance functions in-house and resume direct management. So the recommended action that we have for you today is to resume direct operations and maintenance responsibility for Breeze, Lift, and Flex under a phased approach. So we do want to allow for an extended transition period, just in case we run into any hiccups. It allows us to do this on a gradual basis and make sure that all of our bases are covered. So to do that, we will be asking you to allow us to execute a contract modification with MV. We're going to change the single 3-year option into 3 1-year options that we can advance one at a time if we need to. We'll be getting procurements ready for specialty services and contracts for parts and supplies. And we'll be returning to you with a required balanced 5-year fiscal forecast, at least one fiscal year prior to the transition, and the budget and the final transition will be subject to board review and approval. So in our FY23 budget, we have some strategic initiatives that are related to bus operations. The first one is the Breeze Speed and Reliability Study. These are a series of improvements made in conjunction with local jurisdictions on our 10 busiest routes to roads, intersections, and traffic signals, and other possible improvements that would enhance the speed and reliability of the Breeze bus service on those routes. Those improvements will result in more frequent and more reliable service on those routes. The second one is the zero emissions bus transition. So we are adding zero emission buses to the fleet. I have 4 of my 6 battery electric buses sitting on property as we speak in Escondido. The other 2 should be arriving by Christmas. We have 8 fuel cell electric buses arriving late next year that you just approved in the last action. And we have 17 more fuel cell buses that are going to be slated to arrive in late 2024. Each of those bus types requires an extensive training program for operators, maintenance, and supervision staff so that we know how to operate those and how to maintain those. And then the last one is mobility as a service, or microtransit. Microtransit has been identified in both regional and NCTD studies as a rider generating service alternative to fixed drop bus service. We are currently advancing our procurement for microtransit operating software, and we expect to award that procurement in February of next year. So one of NCTD's top priorities is improving the quality of services and being able to implement new and emerging technologies like microtransit and zero emissions bus technology. Bringing the operations and maintenance in-house allows us direct control and singular accountability for ensuring that service outcomes are met and that all facets of customer and employee engagement are aligned and integrated throughout NCTD. So I'd like to talk about the district priorities in fiscal year 2009 and fiscal year 2023. They are quite a bit different. The decision to contract these services out in 2009 was to address a projected 5-year structural financial deficit of over $80 million that was primarily due to the added operations costs associated with Sprinter and the impact of the Great Recession on state and local sales tax revenues. There was also a large capital project backlog in 2009. Inflationary, if we fast forward to 2023, however, inflationary pressure on the contractor allows our internal cost structure to be more competitive. The expectations of customers in 2023 are also vastly different than they were in 2009. The demands on the district, such as the transition to zero emissions and the implementation of microtransit, along with equity and social justice, require a higher level of quality in the day-to-day operation of our service. So the next couple of slides are related to our financial analysis of this. We've got some key assumptions here, and I want to make sure that we're all talking on the same page and the same language. So the price projections that you see before you are based on the FY25 cost projection that's contained in the most updated agreement with MV. That would be the first option year if we were to execute the option years, which is why we selected this year to model. So using a very, very conservative cost estimate on NCTD costs, you can see that the estimated cost for direct management over the existing agreement is roughly $4.4 million or 9.7% higher. The key assumptions in this, we do gain some efficiencies in staffing from the elimination of duplicative management and administrative positions. The big assumption here that all employees are participating in the family level of healthcare and also receiving a CalPERS pension and other benefits program. And I can't stress that one enough, and I'll go into that one in more detail. That is a huge assumption. This also does, to the favor of the district, remove the 11.5% contractor profit and overhead, because we would be operating in-house. There would be no need to pay profit and overhead. So apologize for the sort of smallish numbers on this slide. There are 4 line items that I really want to call attention to. That's the pension and healthcare line items, and then the bottom 2 lines are the overhead and profit. So the column there, sort of directly in the middle, is the NCTD expected costs. The column directly next to it is the MV costs that are contained in the current cost forms. And then the column next to it is either the increase or decrease, and then the percentage increase or decrease. So the first one I want to call attention to is the pension. So NCTD has adopted the lowest tier of CalPERS pension. That was not in place when we outsourced bus operations. We were paying a much higher tier of pension. So any incoming employee that was not a member of CalPERS when we outsourced would come in at this lower tier, which does represent a cost savings. We have advanced early payment of our existing obligation, which again, at the time, we were projected to pay that off 10 to 15 years longer than we are now. And we're also already paying pension liabilities for any employees that were here and already vested in the pension. So those costs are already included in the budget as it stands today with no action from you. The other number I want to call attention to is the healthcare. I can't state this enough. This is very, very conservatively budgeted. So we've assumed that every employee, consistent with Board Policy 17, we've assumed that every employee is taking family health care as a worst case scenario. So that means we're contributing family level health care to all 448 incoming employees. Looking at the coverage that's currently selected by the MV employees, roughly 54% of them are opting for single party coverage, 10% of them are opting for 2-party coverage, 4% are opting for family coverage, and 32% are opting for no healthcare coverage, meaning they either don't want to take insurance because they don't want to, or because they already have coverage from somewhere else. So if we were to take those ratios and apply them to our NCTD contribution levels in this model, it actually lowers our expected contribution to $2.4 million. If you look at the MV line item, it's at $2.36 million. So there's a cost savings of over $5 million if those ratios stay the same. So based on that analysis, the most likely scenario if current employee healthcare choices remain constant, the cost of resuming direct operations is likely to be cost neutral or a cost savings to NCTD because we would be removing $5 million from that bottom line. This analysis also doesn't include any salary savings that will occur on an annual basis due to vacancies.
I just want to just put a fine point on what Damon just said. We budgeted for every position to be filled for the entire year with the maximum health care at the highest level expense. So this model is extremely conservative. And when we apply just rational information comparing current demographics, it does indicate that we're most likely scenario will generate a cost savings as a result of doing this. But again, we want to make sure we present a conservative, robust analysis that we can understand exactly what the potential scenarios could play out.
Thank you. And we want to put this also in comparison to our annual operating budget. So the FY23 operating budget was $170 million. This $4.4 million increase represents a 2.6% projected cost increase if all of those costs materialize that we have in our conservative model. And I'd also like to point out that we've ended the last 4 fiscal years with positive variances that equal or exceed $4.4 million. So if the board is supportive of the recommended action, we will be evaluating alternatives to the CalPERS retirement plan and the current medical insurance program in an attempt to further save costs. The Teamsters Local 542 and the Amalgamated Transit Union Local 1309 represent these employees, and they both offer pension or defined benefits programs as well as healthcare. So we'll be in discussions with those two groups to see if there's an alternative there that could save us even more money. In addition, we were talking about some other activities that we need to undertake in order to be successful in this. So the first one is to establish a human resources information system. Right now, a lot of the processes around payroll and HR at NCTD, because of its small size, are manual, a lot of paper-driven processes. So we are currently in the process of procuring a human resources information system that will automate a lot of that and offer some self-service option to the employees. The second one is we need to establish support functions such as a dedicated training department. When we contracted out, both rail and bus had their own training provided by the contractors. However, we need to bring these two functions together and establish our own training department to make sure that we're offering robust quality training to all employees. We're going to expand the use of the EAM system that's put in place by rail over to bus as a cost savings measure rather than going out and procuring a separate system to do that. That's the tool that we use to track the maintenance on the vehicles. We need to implement an operator and crew daily dispatch management tool. This is another piece of software that's specialized in operations and helps us keep track of operator vacancies, the use of PTO or sick leave, and also helps to make sure that we have full coverage for the day by planning out vacations and other things. We will need to establish contracts for parts and other services. And we do need to develop an onboarding and training program for current and new employees that focuses on continuous development of staff knowledge, skills, and abilities. And finally, we would be developing those job descriptions for those new positions and be conducting a comprehensive recruitment and selection process to ensure that we're hiring the best qualified applicants. So as I said before, there is an alternative action before the board. We can continue contracted operations for some or all of the services being currently provided by MB. We would ask that you would authorize the executive director to execute a 3-year contract extension, extending that out to 2027. In the meantime, we would be busy developing that scope of work and the contract documents necessary for us to go out to bid and procurement for those services. We would anticipate releasing the RFP in June of 2026. We would award the contract in January of 2027, and then the contractor would take over operations in July of 2027. So to summarize, there's 2 potential board actions before you today. Our recommended action is to authorize the phased resumption of direct operations and maintenance responsibility for the Breeze, Lift, and Flex services by July 1st, 2027. to include executing a contract modification with MV that will allow up to 3 one-year extensions and advancing those procurements for the provision of certain specialty services and contracts for parts and supplies, subject to the executive director presenting and the board adopting a balanced 5-year fiscal forecast at least 1 fiscal year prior to the transition. The alternate action is that you would direct staff to continue directed contracted operations for some or all of the services provided by MB, to include authorizing the executive director to execute a 3-year contract extension. That's the conclusion of my presentation, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you very much, Damon, for that very detailed presentation. Suhail, do we have any public comments on this item? I think I have the slip, actually.
Madam Chair, Ms. Jenny Vasquez. Ms. Vasquez, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, honorable board members. My name is Jaime Vasquez. I'm the Secretary Treasurer of Teamster Local 542, and I'm the Principal Officer of such local. With me is Matt Snyder. He's the business representative of this contract, and he represents the workers that we're mainly talking about today. Teamsters Local 542 has represented NCTD Breeze operations for over 20 years. We represent approximately 400 Breeze employees, to include operators, mechanics, facility technicians, paratransit dispatchers, and reservationists. Our members have continued to be a strong partner with the district in support of our shared mission of providing safe, reliable, and efficient transportation service. Today, we are pleased to see that the district is on a solid financial footing and is advancing key plans to implement new services like microtransit and new technologies like hydrogen and battery electric buses. NCTD's future success in implementing new strategies to grow ridership and revenue requires a well-trained, fully staffed, and experienced workforce that feels supported in all aspects of their work. Our members believe that the relationship between NCTD and the union members is more collaborative, and we both share a vested interest in shared long-term success and understand the value of investing in employee knowledge, skills, and abilities, and their individual economic and healthcare outcomes. Our members have told us that they want to work directly for the district and to restore the sense of having a career versus just a job that existed prior to outsourcing. And if you look around, we do have a lot of our members here today in support. Teamster Local Union 542 support the staff recommendation and encourages the board to approve it. We are hopeful that staff can advance insourcing as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vasquez, Jaime Vasquez, and Mr. Snyder for standing up for him, and everyone else who came out to participate in this and show their support. Really appreciate it. At this time, if we have no further speakers, Madam Clerk?
Do not, Madam Chair.
Okay, at this time, public registration to speak on this item has ended. I'd like to share a few comments before I move to board questions and comments. First, the staff recommendation today provides a policy framework for the board. It requires staff to return to us with a 5-year budget plan that is balanced before direct operations can be resumed. Second, insourcing of service is likely to increase costs. Well, maybe not, as we've heard. Third, I strongly believe that improving service quality and implementing new technologies that support increased ridership must be one of the board's top priorities. It's certainly one of mine. Okay, so I will move to the board for their comments or questions. I'll start at this end.
Sure, thank you. And thanks for the presentation. I think, just based on some of the comments that were made, I mean, I think I'm glad to see that we're looking at the insourcing option, right? I think it just allows for us to continue to build and retain our own talent and have the ability to do what we can to serve those that have served our communities. And so really looking forward to being able to see that. I know that it can be more expensive, but I'm really glad to hear that the district's actually investing in our employees and ensuring that we're going to be doing that. So looking forward to supporting the staff recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Quirk.
A quick question. Matt, do you know, what does MTS do? Is that insourced or outsourced?
The combination. I think about 50% of their service is direct operations and about 50% is contract. I may be off on a percentage, but I'm confident they operate directly and contract out some services.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I want to thank the speaker for speaking. You spoke very well. Thank you.
Board Member Hensy.
Yeah, that was very powerful to hear from the speakers and see all of you stand up and say that this is the direction that you'd like the board to take. I think this is all of our district that we live in, and we need to make sure that we're taking care of one another. Really great presentation for us to be able to see that this is manageable within our budget projections, and also that the trade-off we're making here is 11% profits for a private company versus 11% for pensions and healthcare. And to me, that's an investment that we should be making. So I'll support staff's recommendation today as well.
Thank you. Directors at that end, anyone else wish to speak? Board Member Jenkins, then Contreras.
Thank you. Yes, I was pleased to see the employees share their thoughts because I was curious as to what you thought about the consideration. I like the idea that we are considering this, developing a strategy. I like that we're not committing yet until we make sure it's analyzed further. I think we have to realize that it's possible some of this board won't be here when that decision comes. And so I like the idea that we're not making a decision for a board that could be several years out. I do have a couple questions on I think it was page 5 where it talked about requiring 11 new operators. Why would it take 11 new operators if we're doing the
So
same?
that's the microtransit service that we're launching.
Okay.
It's sort of a separate action from
Okay.
what we're asking for you today, but the microtransit, the first zone, we're going to have to either recut the work so that we can find the 11 FTEs within the current workforce, or potentially that might require an increase of 11 operators when we start operating microtransit.
Okay. And then on page 10, where you were talking about the annual operating budget comparison. So we're looking at increasing the operations 2.6% of the current fiscal year. When I'm assuming as part of this analysis, you'll have a number for the fiscal year 27.
Right.
To tell the board at that point in time.
Correct.
What that 2.6 has become.
Correct.
Okay. That's all. Thanks.
Board Member Contreras. Oh, excuse me. Board Member Contreras.
Thank you so much for the presentation and for providing us the critical information that we need to ask good questions, have good discussion. And I do really want to thank the employees for coming forward and voicing their opinion. I think it's a great direction to have as much as we can in-house because it just allows the flow of communication a lot more, especially when we're looking at some of these new buses, whether it's zero emission buses or fuel cell, right? Being able to kind of have a more coordinated communication as to how these technologies are operating. So that way we can get to fixing them as soon as possible if necessary, and find out how to tweak it a little bit more so that they run reliably and frequently like what we want. So I haven't heard a motion yet for this. So I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve the recommended action, which is to authorize the phased resumption of direct operations and maintenance responsibilities for Breeze, Lift, and Flex services and blah, 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 the rest of it. But thank you all so much. It really is important for us to hear directly from our bus operators and maintenance and service providers. So hopefully you all come back and give us some more of your comments. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would be delighted to second that because I was actually going to make that motion. But I think that there are a number of people here who would that would have appreciated making that motion. So motion by Contreras, second by Edson. And I think our things are working, you guys.
No, they're not.
No? Okay.
Still sleeping on the job.
Do you want a verbal or do you want to call the vote? Okay, roll call vote.
We can do the same thing.
Vice Chair Patel,
Aye.
Board Member Quirk,
Aye.
Board Member Hinsey,
Yes.
Board Member McNamara, Board Member Weiss,
Yes.
Board Member Desmond, Board Member Jenkins,
Yes.
Board Chair Edson,
Yes.
Board Member Contreras.
Aye.
On the motion of Board Member Contreras, seconded by Board Chair Edson to authorize the phased resumption of direct operations and maintenance responsibility for Breeze, Lift, and Flex services by July 1, 2027, to include executing a contract modification with NV Transportation that will allow up to 3 one-year extensions and advancing procurements for the provision of certain specialty services and contracts with parts and supplies, subject to the Executive Director presenting and the North County Transit District's Board of Directors adopting a balanced 5-year fiscal forecast at least 1 fiscal year prior to the transition. Motion passes.
Great. Thank you again, everyone, for being here. The second other business item on our agenda is a request to approve a letter to Sandag regarding the Lausanne Rail Corridor realignment. The board may recall that this letter was discussed as part of our action to approve the discretionary grants program during the September board meeting. Chris Orlando, Chief Planning and Communications Officer, will present this item. Chris, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Chair Edson. I'm here this afternoon with our Director of Engineering, Scott Scheuer. Am I not on? You're on. Get closer. How about I get closer? Let me start over. Thanks very much, Chair Edson. I'm here this afternoon with our Director of Engineering, Scott Scheuer, and our Governmental Affairs Officer, Mary Dover. If we could have the first slide, we'll start the presentation. So as the board is aware, our region was fortunate enough to receive an allocation from the state for $300 million in the FY 2023 budget. For the realignment of begin the study of the realignment of the rail line along the Del Mar Bluffs. Sandag has put forward its plans for use of the funds, which includes design, project approval and environmental analysis, as well as potential right-of-way acquisition. The 2021 regional plan outlined Sandag's goal of completing this project by 2035. Next slide, please. That's not the right slide. Oh, okay, next. Yeah, okay, next slide, please. The draft letter in your board packet, as the board will recall in the September board meeting, the board, as a part of the discretionary grant strategy, discussion was had regarding the use of the $300 million allocation, and the board directed staff to draft a letter to Sandag about the uses of the allocation. So in your board packet, you have a draft letter to Sandag from NCTD. It emphasizes the board's support for the rail realignment through Del Mar. It highlights the need for peer review and regular updates to the NCT's board and the Sandag board. And it urges Sandag to prioritize state of good repair, capacity enhancing projects, as well as the necessity to complete projects such as the San Diego double track phase 2 in conjunction with the realignment. Next slide, please. So I wanted to provide a little more context around the San Diego phase 2 project. So I'm going to let Scott talk about that project.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so The San Diego Double Track Phase 2 project is the project that is immediately north of the proposed tunnel alignments. And then there's actually a little bit of overlap between the two projects. So it is, the most relevant project when you're talking about the tunnel project. So the project will replace the existing 100-year-old 1,000-foot-long bridge. It will replace it with a bridge that addresses climate change by raising the bridge by 8 feet. It will build a special events platform for direct access to the fairgrounds, which will be a good improvement for the region and a ridership driver for us and for our partners. It'll, I guess, actually for next slide, please. So a little additional reinforcement on those points here. Like I said, this replaces the 100-year-old bridge. You see the picture there, really the condition of the bridge. As I noted, the bridge is a little low when you look at the hydraulics. The bridge is susceptible to flood. And the rail could actually be overtopped by floodwaters at its current elevation. And as noted in the 2021 regional plan, the project is slated for completion or is prioritized for completion in 2025. Next slide. So this is kind of the overall look at the tunnel alignments and the surrounding areas. The purple line at the very left, that is the San Diego Double Track Phase 2 project. The two red dashed lines, those are the two alternative alignments for the tunnel that are under study. And then the green on the far right, that's the Sereno Miramar Double Track Phase 2 project. That's another high priority project that is slated for completion by 2025 by the regional plan. Next slide. So this slide is a little busy, but it does tell a real important point when you're talking about prioritization of projects. The tunnel versus the San Diego project. If you look at the far left of the slide, you see a dashed purple line. That is the existing top of rail elevation of the bridge. And then directly above that is the red dash line. That is the FEMA base flood elevation. So, as I said before, the bridge is susceptible to flooding. The solid blue line that is above that, that is, at least to the left, that is the elevation of the rail after the San Diego Phase 2 project is complete. As you move to the right, that gets into what a proposed top of rail elevation would be for the tunnel alignment. And so,
got it.
Yeah.
Just to pause you there.
Sure.
So what you're showing here is that the San Diego Double Track project, despite, all of the other great benefits you're saying, this drawing shows this elevation being raised to go into a tunnel.
It shows the elevation being raised. And so, kind of the consequence of not doing the double track project first, if you stay with the elevation at the purple dash line, that leaves the tunnel susceptible to flooding. There isn't, kind of that natural berm that's built by raising the tracks. So water would be able to infiltrate into the tunnel anytime there's that large flood event. Closing the tracks, closing the tunnel. We are talking about putting in flood walls. If those fail, then you have a tunnel full of water and you're closed until you can pump all the water out of that tunnel. So to be able to build a resilient facility, a $3 billion facility, you have to raise the rail immediately to the north of the tunnel to make it so that it does not flood. That's really the big point here. Next slide. I'll turn it back over to Chris now.
Just to emphasize that, the reason we're pursuing and we're talking about this is as Sandag has put forward in its 2021 regional plan, the raising of this bridge and the completion of the San Diego Phase 2 is actually essential for the realignment project and the tunnel. In fact, if the rationale for moving the tracks off the bluff is sea level rise and erosion from sea level rise, constructing a tunnel that is below the current levels of sea level doesn't really make any sense. So our point in pursuing this is to make it clear that this project, San Diego Phase 2 and related projects, is really an essential first step to the realignment and eventual movement of the tracks off the bluffs and the tunnel project. So there's been a lot of discussion about what our intention here is, but our intention is to advance what we believe is the first step in that project, which is San Diego Phase 2. Here you see the funding for San Diego Phase 2. We have currently identified about $15 million in federal sources for the project. We have a pending grant with the federal government for another $91.5 million. That grant requires a local match if we're successful of $45 million. So if we get the grant, we would have to have a local match of $45 million. For the bridge only project, it would be $152.5 million. If we do the bridge plus the platform, it adds another $80 million for a total of $233 million. And so you see there in the big red circle, the unfunded portion of this project, which is $126 million. But just to emphasize, that number assumes that we're successful receiving the mega grant. We're expecting that announcement really sometime early next year. So we don't know that yet, but we're hopeful that we get that grant allocation. Next slide, please. And so in your packet, you had a draft of the letter that we'd like to send with your approval to SANDAG. And so the recommendation is that we approve the draft of the letter and authorize the executive director to send it on your behalf. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, the letter would come from the chair. I apologize.
Thank you. I'm always in the hot seat on those.
Yes, you are.
Okay, so Chris, just for the sake of clarity, it's maybe boring in reiteration, but I just want to confirm that the CTC's already allocated $150 million of the $300 million, correct?
Correct. On December 8th, they allocate $152 million. Correct.
Okay. And that money was approved in the state budget for the purpose of the realignment of the rail.
So it'll do the initial design, alternatives, and some administrative legal items as well. That was what SANDAG put forward for that.
Oh, okay. And if SANDAG's unable to spend the entire $300 million in these state general fund monies as planned for that design, environmental, and potential right-of-way acquisition, also, I believe, within the allotted time frame, and this is kind of a two-part question, what happens then, but also what impact might this letter have if SANDAG is actually able to spend the entire amount as planned?
Well, so the first, let me provide some more detail around the first item. So when the state allocated the money, they put a deadline of June 2027 for the $300 million to be encumbered. And to be encumbered means SANDAG submits a funding plan to CalSTA approves that plan, and the CTC takes action. California Transportation Commission takes action to authorize the funding. So that's what occurred for the first tranche of $152 million in December. So by June 2027, they'd have to do a similar action for the remaining $148 million. So that $148 million would be, as SANDAG has put forward in its budget, an additional $90+ million for design, $45 million for right-of-way acquisition, and administrative, legal, communications, those sorts of activities would be the remainder of the allocation. And just for some clarity along the timelines, I noted a big chunk of that remaining funding is for right-of-way acquisition. So that assumes that a route alternative has made it through the environmental process, has been selected, and the right-of-way acquisition that needs to occur has been furthered in that 4.5 year timeline. So by June 2027. So a pretty aggressive timeline for land acquisition. So there is an opportunity that some of that money would not be expended by the deadline. If that were to occur and the money is not encumbered by June of 2027, then the allocation essentially expires. It would not be available. So whatever amounts weren't encumbered would essentially be returned to the state.
Okay. And the second part of my question was what impact might this letter have if Sandag's actually able to spend the entire amount?
So what we're seeking is for Sandag is flexibility in the decisions around that remaining $148 million, so that if their timelines change, or if we need to and we're able to expedite projects that are critical to the overall effort to realign the tracks, such as San Diego Phase 2, that we could allocate funding out of the $300 million to those projects.
Okay, so we're not just trying to grab the money that Del Mar thinks is to take the trucks off the bluff, right? We're just saying, if you don't get this money spent in a timely manner, rather than giving it back to the state, we would like you to consider using it for these shovel-ready projects that are part and parcel. It's almost like they're married together, right? The tunnel alignment plus the bridge.
Yeah, so it's not let's divert money away from the project. It's let's have the flexibility to make the first real infrastructure steps towards the project.
Okay. All right. Okay. So Mr. Tucker.
Well, I'm just going to put a point on it because we talked about this. There's no way you could be in favor of the realignment project and not be in favor of the San Diego project, because you can't do the project without the San Diego project being done. When you talk about a $3.5 billion project, and Scott, remember you're pulling from an estimate that was done significantly a long time ago in a pre-inflationary environment. It's going to be incremental nature in terms of the projects, but the bottom line of it is you can't support, if you don't support San Diego, you don't support the realignment, because you can't do the realignment until the San Diego Bridge project has been done. And the fact of the matter is that the region, the state, and the federal government have invested money already in the San Diego project to get it at shovel-ready status. At the end of the day, who's going to feel good if you did spend $300 million on a bunch of paper and environmental drawings that may have to be redone? Because $300 million is a lot of money, but it ain't a lot of money if you're talking about a $5 billion project. So I think the recommendation that we put forward here is just a rational thought process of how do you advance a project incrementally and mitigate your chances of having regretted decisions. The proposal that we're putting forward is a no regret decision, because you will have a tangible project at the end for which the public will have independent use and utility that matches the project that you really want to do. That's a big lift. That's a conditions precedent of that project. That's all what this agenda item is. This is not a big grab and steal away from anyone. This is in furtherance of that project, taking a rational and sane and business-oriented approach to advancing it.
Thank you for that. Suhel, are there any public comments on this item?
Yes, Madam Chair. Yes, Madam Chair.
And how many do we have?
One public speaker, Terry Gasterland, on Zoom.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Gasterland, can you hear us?
Yes, I just got the unmute. Thank you very much.
You have 3 minutes.
My name is Terry Gasterland. I'm a member of the Del Mar City Council, and I'm here to remind you of some of the language in the letter that the City of Del Mar gave to you. Chair Edson, members of the board, the City of Del Mar expresses strong opposition to the NCTD Board of Directors authorizing NCTD staff to request that Sandag pursue alternative uses of the $300 million. We would like to emphasize that the securing of $300 million in state funding for the rail realignment project was hard fought for by elected officials at the local, county, state, and federal level and Sandag staff. The funding is critically needed in order to relocate the NCTD Railroad away from the environmentally sensitive and fragile Del Mar bluffs. As you well know, the railroad tracks pose a significant threat to the bluffs, structures, commuters, and the public, and this crucial funding will advance the project's timeline for for being shovel-ready and competitive for more critically needed funding. We're particularly concerned with the sentence, "It is critical that the $300 million direct appropriation to be used to provide tangible results for the region, including by advancing the San Diego Phase 2 and Sorrento to Miramar Phase 2 projects. These are separate projects." The presentation contained assumptions about a tunnel which is not yet designed. Sandag has hired consultants specifically to design options for ingress and egress, including looking at the railroad tracks in the lagoon and the entirety of the tracks through Del Mar and across the lagoon. In closing, please refrain from approving the proposed letter. The letter is not written with the timely manner language that was just discussed. Our city's letter to the board, was signed by our mayor and approved by the council. As a last remark, our new mayor for the next year is Mayor Tracy Martinez. We rotate mayors in Del Mar, and we welcome Mayor Martinez, who, it happens, is Del Mar's first Hispanic mayor. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. Now we'll move to board questions and comments. Do any members of the board wish to speak on this item? Okay, I'm like, okay, I've been starting at that end. Board Member Quirk.
Thank you, Chair Edson. Just to follow on Councilmember Gasterland's comments, I believe I made at the last meeting, or maybe it was 2 meetings ago, there were originally 5 alignments for the tunnel, one of which was for the rail relocation, one of which was along the I-5. I made the comment that the decision to eliminate the alignment along the I-5 was made without any public input, really. So there are a lot of residents within Del Mar who are pushing, advocating for that option to be reopened. And how it's relevant today is, if potentially the rail realignment does go along the 5, does that create different dynamics with this project that's being discussed today? So lots of different, issues to consider, which is another reason why the city of Del Mar would be opposed to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Did I see Board Member Hensy? Yes.
So I was on maternity leave for this September meeting, so I'm just kind of new to this discussion, but I just have a couple questions. So the first question is, are we confident that Sandag has the authority to make this decision? This was given to us through legislation and from the state. So would we need concurrence from the state?
So it essentially, the letter has quite a bit of detail in terms of setting up a lot more rigor and process around this. So no doubt about it, if Sandag would have to work with the sponsor of the bill to revise the budget bill language to allow for this.
Got it. Okay. And then the other question is, this is a shovel-ready project, the bridge.
Yes.
So being that the new alignments are not shovel-ready, are we concerned that we would need to have redesigns to make them consistent?
No, and this is, in fact, as Board Member Quirk was making the comment, is the significant concern that I have. So the region has gone through a process of evaluating different alternatives in terms of alignment, and it was narrowed down to 2 alignments. It's critical for NCTD to replace the San Diego Bridge. For many of you board members, you were not around earlier when we had to stabilize that bridge when I arrived, I think in like 2011 timeframe. That bridge has a replacement that's due in the very near term. That bridge is susceptible to all of the things that folks have talked about. But once we start talking about changing the location of that bridge, that will mean significant amount of money has already been spent to design and environmentally clear a project that we said we're going to start all over for again, chasing a $5 billion likely project. And so those are the kinds of decisions where we could end up spending hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars and then still being left with needing to stabilize a bridge that is a state of good repair need that is susceptible to all of the climate impacts that we all fear. So the longer we go and say, let's start looking at different options, it becomes more expensive to do this project. And in fact, I remember when this project was quoted to me about as $160 million project, I woke up looked around and it was 220 million as the new estimate. So every day and every year we delay, just keep adding numbers on to that project. And if we get into studying other alternatives, then that $300 million likely will be not spent because we're going to be studying alternatives after alternatives after alternatives within that 5-year period.
Thank you very much.
Yes, Board Member Weiss.
What document is being processed for the tunnel alignments? In terms of, I'm presuming it must be either like some type of project design study or.
So that's what the initial $152 million is intended to fund, which would be the initial environmental. Scott, you can.
Yeah, an alternatives analysis has been complete to date. Sandag completed that within the last couple of months. I believe it was actually last month. So the next phase is the preliminary engineering and environmental clearance.
So Sandag has already identified a preferred alternative?
The two alternatives, yeah. So
Those are the two.
they'll kind of advance the two in parallel in order to make a decision.
So the I-5 corridor option is no longer an alternative whatsoever in the.
No, it
what would
was,
be the
it was
environmental one?
one of the 5 alternatives that were studied in the AA, but it wasn't one of the top 2 ranked.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Board members at that end? No other questions? Okay. Board Member Contreras.
Thank you again for the presentation and for drafting this letter. I'm in support of this letter. I don't believe that it takes anything away from any of the predetermined projects that are necessary, but it actually advances the fact that we need to have all these different components built in order to have a successful low sand corridor. I am just curious. So does the $300 million appropriation hinge on us needing to have a regional plan that is approved by CARB?
No, that it has no relationship to that. This is just a project that has been identified as a critical regional priority project.
Okay, that's good to hear. Because I have concerns about the 2021 regional plan as amended.
And I can provide some clarity. So it was a direct appropriation from the state legislature. That's why it's different. It's not, the funding plan is approved by a state agency, but it was an effort of the legislature.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I just think it's, as the climate crisis continues and accelerates, our infrastructure is so vulnerable to sea level rise. So, being able to have different aspects of this project that are extremely susceptible to sea level rise, it's critical that we are good stewards of this money and appropriate it where needed so that the whole corridor becomes more resilient. So I appreciate all the effort that went into investigating this, bringing a presentation and drafting a really good letter to Sandag. So I'm in approval. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have a question that I'd like a really brief answer to, because I have a board member that I think needs to leave soon and we have a vote coming. But before I ask this question, I'd like for everyone here to think on this while Matt's answering my question. I support the letter, but I would like to propose that the reference to the Sorrento to Miramar portion be removed from the letter, because I think that what's fundamental here is the San Diego Bridge. So my question for Matt is what's the projected outcome should the San Diego Bridge fail? And sitting on low sand, right now I can tell you what's happening upstream with San Clemente. I think it would be something similar and I don't even want to think about it, but please tell me.
It's disruption of all rail operations. No, it cuts it in half. And what we're being put at risk at is if this project doesn't happen in a reasonable period, it pushes NCTD having to fund a rehabilitation project. I think most of you folks remember, and I'm sorry, I'm not doing a good job of being brief, but Southern California Edison did dredging in that lagoon, and they stabilized that. They worked with us to stabilize that bridge, and we stabilized. I think it was for additional 10 to 15 years. That period of time is rapidly approaching, and so time is of the essence for us to move this forward. Otherwise, you're going to force us into a rehab project right ahead of a project that's got to happen for the replacement of that bridge project. Sorry.
Well, thank you for that answer. So with that in mind and having everyone's questions apparently asked and answered, I am going to go ahead and move approval of this item with, but I propose the reference to the Sorrento to Miramar be removed from the letter.
Sure, can I make one more comment?
Certainly.
It is my understanding that Sandag is applying for a grant for the bridge here. Is that correct? Are you aware of that?
Sandag is collaborating with NCTD, and that grant that they're applying for is the $43 million match to. It's a little bit more to the mega grant application, but we still have that deficit of $126 million, which still needed to be made up if we're successful, even with that mega grant.
Okay, so that's separate from this.
Yes, sir.
So thank you. Motion on the floor.
I'll
Do I
second
have
that
a
motion.
Second by Hensy. I think we are going to roll call the vote. Thank you.
Okay, Vice Chair Babatel,
Aye.
Board Member Quirk,
No.
Board Member Hensy,
Yes.
Board Member McNamara, Board Member Weiss,
Yes.
Board Member Desmond, Board Member Jenkins,
Yes.
Board Chair Edson,
Yes.
Board Member Contreras.
Aye.
On the motion of Board Chair Edson, seconded by Board Member Hensy to approve the letter to Sandag regarding the low sand rail corridor alignment, motion passes.
Thank you. So the next item on our agenda is actually moving backward to minutes, or excuse me, to consent. Board Member Quirk asked that two items be pulled, number 5 and number 12. Board Member Quirk.
It'll be fast, so.
Okay, thanks. Go for it.
Can we pull it up by any chance? Can we pull up what's in the actual? Yes, can we or no? We can't do that. Okay. So I would just like to point out that and I made these comments in my earlier comments on the corridor plan, but the ridership numbers, is it on?
No, turn it on.
Is that on?
Is it light?
The blue light's on now.
Okay.
So the ridership numbers for the Sprinter are down about 50% from pre-pandemic levels. The coaster numbers are down about 40% from pre-pandemic levels, and the bus Breeze ridership numbers are down about, I think, 35%. So just wanted to point that out as we have these discussions about all these spending projects. Okay. And then on item number 12, I did think that we would have the visual of the presentation, but I did make some comments for the Performance Administration and Finance Committee, and the comments are in the agenda report. I don't know if all the board members had a chance to read them, but I would recommend that you do so. And I just had some maybe professional disagreements about how some of the financial and accounting terms are described for financial profit or not, based on what's in the annual comprehensive financial report. Okay, that's it.
Thank you. Are there any public speakers on? We've already asked about consent, so there were no public speakers on consent. Okay. Well, then, thank you. A question from Board Member Contreras.
Yes, question regarding agenda item number 5. With the current ridership that we have, let's just look at low sand. Are we still the second busiest railway in the United States?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
I'm curious to see what the figures are. Because I mean, our ridership continues to improve, and the frequency on the coaster has been a game changer for ridership. So I love the direction that we're moving in. Not everybody has access to remote work. And we especially see that on our Breeze bus system. So we obviously don't have enough frequency to meet demand. So I look forward to continuing to progress our mission for more frequent and reliable transit for the public. Thank you.
And to answer your question regarding LoSAN, they are continuing to see increases in ridership, and actually pretty substantial increases in ridership. Unfortunately, there is the situation right now in San Clemente, but there are bus bridges. They're working, and it's surprising that it hasn't had as dramatic it's not as dramatic as it was the first month. People have adjusted, and they're still realizing it's way more fun to take the train, even if you have to take a bus in between, than to drive to LA or through LA. So thanks for asking that question. Okay, so we have 2 items on consent, number 5 and number 12. May I have a motion to approve those items?
Moves to approve.
Motion by Contreras.
Hensy will second.
Second by Hensy. Please call the vote.
Vice Chair Patel,
Aye.
Board Member Cork,
Aye.
Board Member Hensy,
Yes.
Board Member McNamara, Board Member Weiss.
Yes.
Board Member Desmond, Board Member Jenkins.
Yes.
Board Chair Edson,
Yes.
Board Member Contreras.
Aye.
On the motion of Board Member Contreras, seconded by Board Member Hensy, to receive the monthly transit operations report for October 2022, motion passes.
Thank you very much. This brings us to the Executive Director's report. Mr. Tucker, do you have anything to report?
Just a couple of things. First, I do want to wish the board happy holiday season. Looking forward to a prosperous new year. I do also want to commend my staff on a really, really good year. Working really hard. I think everybody is moving towards trying to shake the malaise off of COVID and really get back to business. It's a transition for everyone in terms of this new normal. I do want to just make my final comment related to the action item today to resume pending certain metrics are met, direct operations. This deja vu all over again for me in terms of coming here facing a 80-something million real deficit over a 5-year period, with a budget that was $100 million at that time. I didn't comment during that item relative to the fact that the Teamsters Union at every step took the real hard hits. And I want to just make sure everyone understands what they sacrificed. I asked them to take a freeze of an increase that they had collectively bargained for. And they voted and did it. I asked them to vote to outsource and lose their pension and get a minimum of 15% reduction. They voted for it. And throughout the tenure of the time that we've had contracted operations, anytime I've reached out to that leadership to ask them to do something, they have done it. And so when they talked about the fact that we do have a true partnership and a respect for our customer and a respect for each other, it is genuine. In no way in the world would I want to put them back in harm's way from a financial point of view. They understood when we outsourced that we were doing it to protect our customers and to protect our employees, because the projection at that time was 50% of service was going to have to be cut, or 50% of the employees laid off. So I would just want to put a fine point on the collaboration that exists, and really at a human level. You know, for me, I grew up in a working class family. And if you grow up in a working class family, you see the different perspective of folks who have to come and do the grind every day, who don't have option to work from home or have the other options that people have that can come into this office and be free and clear from dealing with what society brings you on a day-to-day basis. And so I said it with a genuine affection for those employees and what they bring to the table, and with a genuine hope that we can follow through in a very timely manner to bring those folks back into direct operations of the district. They truly are committed. We put forth the worst case, most conservative scenario, because we wanted to be absolutely candid, show you guys exactly the numbers. We're going to be coming back probably either this June or next June with the final recommendation. We're going to have some discussions with the Teamsters, with the ATU. We're going to lock down things so that we can address any potential long-term risks. But I just wanted to have the executive privilege to say, those folks there represent the tip of the spear for us. And our organizing principle has to be around those folks who do that work on a day-to-day basis. And if we can continue that organization and that focus and what we're trying to build, we can get to every metric that we want to get to in terms of ridership and revenue. It's there for us, but we have to treat everyone and uplift everyone together and respect the fact that, hey, some people may not take transit, but some people are going to take transit, and some people have no choice but to take transit. And so that's how we're going to move the district forward in 2023. And I suspect 2023 is going to be one of our best years. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. I'm going to kick off board member comments or reports with a reminder. All board members received a committee selection preference form at our last board meeting. If you prefer to be recommended for a specific committee, please return your completed form to our clerk of the board, Suhel, by Friday, December 30th, 2022. In accordance with board policy number 3, as chair, I will make committee recommendations for the full board's consideration and adoption at the January 2023 regular board meeting. Before moving to board member reports, I'd also like to wish everyone here happy holidays and share the hope for a peaceful and productive new year. Anyone like to speak? Nope. Well, okay, then. Suhel, do we have any remaining public comments? I believe we have one speaker, correct?
Yes, Madam Chair, Ms. Olga Hernandez. With your permission, Chair, I would like to translate for her.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Olga Hernández.
Good afternoon, my name is Olga Hernandez.
Nosotros estamos haciendo la solicitud de la ruta 604.
We're making a request regarding route 604 Breeze.
De Palomar College hacia la estación de Encinitas Boulevard.
From Palomar College towards the Encinitas Station.
Esa ruta la pusieron específicamente para estudiantes.
They specifically made that route towards students.
Normalmente la usamos más personas trabajadoras.
But it's used mostly for working people.
Nuestra preocupación de ahorita es de que vayan a quitar el servicio durante las vacaciones escolares.
We are concerned that service will be cut during the holidays and the school that is in session.
Y los días festivos que están ahorita de Navidad.
And the holidays upcoming.
Y hemos puesto firmas de todas las personas trabajadoras de las usuarias.
We have signatures in a petition that we've submitted.
Y estamos solicitando el servicio porque estamos si nos quitan ese servicio, caminaríamos 1 hora entre la avenida Oliven High, Rancho Santa Fe, e Encinitas Boulevard.
And we're requesting service to be restored because currently we would have to walk for 1 hour from Olivenhain Road to
Rancho Santa Fe.
To Rancho Santa Fe.
En Encinitas Boulevard.
And Encinitas Boulevard.
Okay, es todo. Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. or Ms. Hernandez. Damon Blythe and Maria Campos, I believe or Katie?
Already discussed.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. All right. Thank you. Gracias. Thank you for coming today. Suhel, are there any remaining public speakers?
Madam Chair.
Okay. Well, thanks, everyone. Our next scheduled board meeting will be the regular board meeting, January 19th, 2023 at 2 p.m. See you next year. This meeting's adjourned.